Broadcasting live from hell, this is The Monstrous Feminine, the podcast where horrible women talk about horror. My name's Louisa, and I'm joined by my enchanting Coven,
Mila,
Tyia,
and Zeba.
And this episode is all about teen horror.
First up, we are discussing Kinji Fukasaku's 2000 gory global phenomenon, Battle Royale. Next, we are analysing the 1999 Korean ghost film, Memento Mori, directed by Kim Tae-young and Min Kyu-dong. Finally, we will be talking about witches in Andrew Fleming's 1996 cult classic, The Craft. Enjoy!
So does anyone have any interesting high school stories or stuff you want to talk about from when you were a teen?
I have a story. I don't want to talk about it, but I shall, because it's so on brand, because we're talking about Memento Mori, and I have a story related to a diary that I brought to school.
This already sounds terrifying.
No, it really, you know what? It goes exactly how you'd expect it to go. So basically, I had this tiny little diary. It was like the size of my palm. It was like one of those keychain ones that you get for like free. And I kept it in my pencil case because I don't know why I felt like I needed to have a diary to school. I was just like, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, and I need to write them in the moment. I can't wait till I get home. Idiot, right? So I had, I kept it in my pencil case, and this one guy, actually I'm gonna say his name, I'm gonna put him on full blast, Ian Fryer.
I think we have the first and the last.
Wow, first and last.
Ian Fryer went down my pencil case without asking me because he needed a pen, and he found it, and he read it, and like 3 pages in, I had written, I'm not going to say his name because this is embarrassing. Let's call him Bob. I had written, Bob is a sex god. Because I had read that book. Yes, I'd read Angus. But it wasn't a thing like when I grew up in California. So obviously people would think that I literally meant sex god, like I was trying to pretend like I'd slept with him, or that I actually was thinking about sex, when really I just meant, like, it was quite innocent. I just meant that he was hot. It was all lies anyway. But and yeah, so he went down my pencil case, and I was like, oh my god, and he was like laughing, and I was like, please don't tell anyone, like, please just don't, you shouldn't have even been in my stuff. And lo and behold, he told everyone, including Bob. Laid out all my business. It was so embarrassing, and I was like kind of a gangly little awkward teen. And he was objectively the hottest guy in school at the time, and only dated the cheerleaders. So it was so embarrassing. Like, I would have never publicized this crush. I would have kept it all to myself. But Ian told everybody, and now I checked his Facebook like a few years back, and he's a Republican. Are we surprised?
I was gonna say, is he a Republican?
He's a Republican, and I was just like, this is not new information. I knew you'd be. What are the characteristics of teen horror?
Romance, unfortunately.
Yeah, some sexy times.
It's usually like somebody gets avenged. There's like a revenge plot of some kind, and like interpersonal beef.
They rely heavily on like high school tropes.
There's also like a lot of suicide. I was like, dang. I didn't realize how often we do this. I mean, I guess we did, but it's just, when I watched, because I watched all of these movies back to back, I was like, oh my god, literally every single one has some sort of like young woman's menace sexuality. I'm like, Jesus.
It's also like relies on that like Breakfast Club trope of like, oh, someone has a bad home life. Like, you always find out about somebody's like outward appearance, and then their home life's shitty, and their dad's like, whatever. That's always like, but it's part of the scare, yeah, exactly. You know? Who would we all be in the high school horror movie? What character do you think you most align with?
I think I'd be like the quiet indie girl who thinks she's like
with
different.
Greasy hair.
Yeah, who think that she's
not like other
girls.
Not that you have greasy hair. Sorry.
Louisa, that was very specific. Hold on.
No. I don't know why.
But I would be that girl, because that's kind of who I thought I wanted to be when I was that age. In like,
yeah, everyone wanted to be her, but
not everyone wanted to be her. She's kind of.
I didn't want to be her.
Exactly.
I did want to be her. Like, did anyone else, when they got sad, imitate that scene in Twilight where it's like, there's a possibility?
Yes. Actually, yeah. I take that back. I did.
I remember when I saw that movie in like theaters, and I actually thought that was a normal response to a breakup. And so when I had like my first breakup,
Is it not a normal response?
Say
it's not
That's
a
what I've
normal
been doing.
response. I don't think it's necessarily normal to wake up in your sleep screaming and attempting to do life-threatening things just so you can see visions of your ex. I think that might be a little bit on the scale of not normal.
We always end up talking about Twilight. Mila's the indie girl.
Yeah.
I feel like I would be the one who's too bold, who like provokes the danger, who like walks into the shit and like is the first one to get their shit rocked. That's definitely me. And it's like, especially because I'm black, I'd be like the first one to go, and I'd be like too confident.
You'd be part of the popular clique, but you're not an asshole.
No, I'd be the asshole. I was the asshole in high school, maybe less so now. I don't know.
Tyia, who would you be?
I'm very
You'd
cautious.
be like immediately shutting it down. Yeah, you'd be like, we're not getting involved with this.
Oh, yeah. Maybe you'd
You
be
know?
like the smart, bookish one. You know what I mean?
But they
Yeah.
die too, right? Ty
Yeah,
wouldn't
but they
die. She'd
have
just
the
get out of
sense.
there. She'd just like be like immediately gone.
Am I the final
Yeah,
girl?
but then she'd get like, no, because I think you'd get murked on the way
No.
home. Like, you'd be like, I'm not gonna, like Barb in Stranger Things, you know what I mean? Like, she's like, I don't want to even be here, and she leaves, and then she dies.
To be fair, when I watched Stranger Things, I thought I would never in my life do this.
Anyway, I don't know who I'd be. Maybe annoying asshole. I'll
Who
die.
would
I just
Louisa
know
be?
I'll die.
I don't know.
Maybe
I
you
don't
would
think
die.
be.
You'd die like 3/4 of the way through.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, you'd probably sacrifice yourself
Why?
for your
For
friends.
who?
For your friends.
Actually, maybe. She is a Libra, and they do like to people please.
There you go. You'd succumb to peer pressure and sacrifice yourself.
It would be like you would jump in the way and save Zoe Kravitz.
Oh, I thought I made that Zoe Deschanel in my head, and I was like, Lord, would I never? But Zoe Kravitz, absolutely.
Is it bold of me to say that I think Louisa would be the one who like has sex at the party and gets
Lol, you get
murked?
murdered
Wait, so you're
for
saying
purification.
I'm the slut?
You're the slut.
No, they're not sluts. They are empowered women, Louisa.
Yeah, but in terms of movie archetypes, you're saying I'm the slut. That's all right. I'll take it. I probably would.
That's the fun.
Sorry, Mom.
They're always the fun one. That's why they have to die soon. Because only the boring people make it till the end.
That's true.
Wait, but we haven't said anyone boring. We all said we'd die, so we
No,
have to
exactly.
Be a
And I
final girl.
don't think none of us are the final girl.
I don't think any of us are the final
Okay,
girl.
we don't have what it takes.
So we've been getting a lot of love recently on our Insta. Even Haley Bennett commented below our post of the movie Swallow. And so this week we are making all of our new followers our Witch of the Week. Thank you for joining our coven. Please go ahead and leave a little more love on the Apple Podcast app by writing a review, a love letter, a poem, a spell, anything really. We crave your attention and love. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day, have a wonderful week, a wonderful life.
I was a complete ignorant little dickhead because I did not realize that Hunger Games had borrowed heavily from Battle Royale, and it was you guys who informed me of this, and I'm pretty upset about it actually, because I was watching Battle Royale for the first time and I was like, this is like the Hunger Games. Like this, there's just so many similarities, and I'm upset at the fact that Hunger Games franchise like never even commented on it. And apparently I read, when I was trying to read about it, it said that she denied, Susan Collins, the author of Hunger Games, has denied ever reading or seeing
Really?
Battle Royale. And I just think like, while I could maybe buy that for the first one, I mean, I think it's dubious. I definitely absolutely cannot buy that she didn't get the catching fire idea of geographical danger zones from Battle Royale, you know, because that's the whole plot of Catching Fire, and it's just straight out of it.
I think she might have changed the narrative on that, because I think at some point she was saying like she saw it, but she didn't think they were similar at all. which, I mean, in itself sounds like a lie. I'm not accusing you of anything,
What?
Susan Collins. I'm not accusing you of anything, but, like, I do think there are quite a few things that people tend to watch in, like, other countries, and then they basically make the same movie in the U.S. under a different title and do not acknowledge at all where it came from. And this is one of those scenarios.
Especially because it was banned everywhere. It was even easier to, like, yoink it from the zeitgeist and, like, call it your own because, like, for a while it was so hard to, like, access, I guess. It's pretty blatant, though. Like, there are some liberties taken, but it was also giving Tarantino, but that's a whole other conversation.
I was reading this article which was it was from the Business Insider, and it was trying to argue that the Hunger Games wasn't plagiarizing Battle Royale. But this writer, whoever it was, said in one of their, like, describing the movie, it said, think of Battle Royale as Kill Bill on steroids. And I was like, oh, dude, I don't trust you in your comparison of which is a ripoff when you orientate yourself in such a shamelessly Western framework.
Well, I think Tarantino did, like, say in interviews that he, like, Battle Royale is one of his favorite films and that he, like, was inspired.
Yeah,
and
but then he made Kill Bill after.
Yeah, I know, but he acknowledged that in the after he hired the actress who plays Go-Go from Battle Royale.
Yeah. That's not what I'm mad at. I'm mad at this article.
The way that you're saying the article is basically making it sound like the movie is copying Tarantino. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm at. And I'm like, you can't just say the inspiration came second.
And the manga's even older.
The whole problem with Tarantino is that you're right, he does acknowledge where he gets a lot of his inspiration from, but then his whole, like, film catalog is just one big pastiche of, like, taking styles from other films from around the world and then doesn't build upon it or inject any kind of substance. Like, he gets the violence down, he loves to aestheticize the violence and make it look cool and fun, but then there's nothing behind. Like, I'm not denying he's a good filmmaker, like, he makes enjoyable films, but there's nothing behind them. He doesn't add anything new.
I do see what you're saying, because, like, I feel like when you look at his film catalog, they're not all distinguishable by a certain style, except for the excessive use of the N-word and violence.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, meta references for days.
So, veering back to Hunger Games
back to Battle Royale
and the Battle Royale debate, although it's always time to drag a male director. I wanted to know which world did you guys think was scarier, if you were having to kill strangers in Hunger Games or Battle Royale and your classmates? Like, or which, not scarier, which one would you rather be in and which would be more interesting to be in? Because I thought, like, the dynamic of having to kill classmates was pretty interesting.
I think I would rather go with the Hunger Games, because these kids seem like they can fight. I don't got time for that. The Hunger Games, it seems like you can take out a good chunk. And you don't know them, so there's, like, no emotional hesitation.
Yeah.
Also,
it would be you're prepared for it you're mentally prepared because it's, like, a yearly event. Whereas with Battle Royale, they were like, yo, what's up? You're going to be killing each other. And they had zero time to process.
Something that I noticed, though, is that I would also want to be in the Hunger Games, even though I did like the interpersonal drama of killing your classmates. But the teenagers in Battle Royale, because they were sent there because of, like, juvenile delinquency or whatever excuse was given, they're automatically portrayed as, like, less innocent than the kids who went into the Hunger Games. Like, the kids who went to the Hunger Games did it because, like, they were doing it for their district, and, like, they would get food and everyone would be taken care of for the year. So that's why people volunteer, because it's, like, something you sacrifice for your community. This is, like, straight up punishment, and they're also, like, not necessarily from the get out when they, like, stab their teacher, like, oh no, these are bad kids, like, let's get it clear, like, these are bad kids who know how to fight, which is, and the other Hunger Games a little bit different because they have, like, older folks going in, but from the get, it's not as, like, what's the word I'm looking for, like, virtuous of a situation to be in.
I feel like the Hunger Games is, like, the PG version of Battle Royale, because there's, like, not as much violence and gore, and there's no real, like, sexual references in the Hunger Games. And it's like when Katniss and Peeta are together at the end or whatever, it's like a very nuclear family type situation. It's not like they on the run from the cops and everything. It's just a very much what you would expect in, like, a fan fiction. Like, it just slowly transitions into normality.
What did you think of the couples? Like, if you're not leave Hunger Games aside, but now I'm thinking of Noriko and Nanahara as a couple. What do you guys think about them? Because I thought Nanahara was queer from
Wait, really?
the way. Yeah, when his friend dies at the beginning, and he's like, "I will honor you by protecting your woman." I was like, this seems very queer to me. Is anyone else?
I didn't pick up on that.
I feel like that seems like very knight in shining armor rhetoric. I don't know. I didn't see it that way.
It seemed pretty straight to me. Like, he was like, I must protect a woman.
I thought he was queer until I knew there was a girl involved at all. I just thought it was implied because they were like very close homies, you know?
I thought so too. Like the whole like scene and then the basketball hallucination.
Yeah.
It was quite.
Guys, they're just buddies.
Yeah, I will say like
Stop it.
I will say in Asia, like male friendships tend to be closer just because there is like sort of the sexualization between male and female relationships, and a lot of the schools aren't necessarily co-ed, and if they are co-ed, they're still like you spend a lot more time with people of the same gender. So I think it's just like the average super close relationship between guys in Japan. I don't know.
Why are you taking this away from me?
I'm so sorry.
What the hell?
I feel like we have
Just
to.
let me queer bait. Who am I hurting?
I liked that there wasn't a romance forced between them, regardless of whether it's because he was gay.
Except at the end.
They just
the
seemed
when they're
like
holding
quite
hands.
a sweet. They weren't together. Yeah, they're allowed to hold hands, Louisa. They can still be friends.
Fellas,
I
is it
certainly
straight
didn't
to
read
hold
any
hands?
romance into that. I just saw it as like, we're on the run together, you know. I would hold you guys' hands if we were on the run. You know what character I did love? Mitsuko, the slightly psychotic.
I love her.
What's that weapon called?
A gun?
No. That she had at the beginning, like the farming tool.
Sickle. It's a sickle.
Sickle, yeah. I thought, A+
Communism.
weapon.
Yeah,
Communism. Okay, that too. I really liked her character. I liked her little bit of background characterization near the end. I just thought she was. I vibed with her psychosis.
I switched allegiances throughout the whole thing with like who was the craziest. Like that's who I was rooting for at any given time. So like homeboy with the orange hair, the transfer student for a minute, definitely. Moshiko, is that her name? Who you were rooting for? My girl Go at one point. I don't know her name in this movie. Anyone who was like completely unhinged from 15 minutes in was like, oh, bet. I've been waiting for the moment to kill my peers. They were my favorites. I wasn't interested in like the lovers or the hackers or anybody with thick backstory. Not into it.
But my favorite was Chigusa. The one who stabs the guy's crotch.
Yeah.
I did not expect that to happen. I don't know. I loved it for obvious reasons. I was like, yes, kill him, stab him, pain, suffer.
I think it's interesting that like the female characters in the movie, with the exception of Chigusa and Mitsuko, the rest of them were kind of whiny and very weak. And then there was like that scene where had the two girls that I guess were friends, and he like shot them up, and then he puts like the megaphone to her mouth while she's like writhing in pain and stomps her in the face and then shoots her some more. And so it's like the violence against women in this was very concerning, and also like making the women like infants, with the exception of the two characters that were very empowered and kind of like took charge of the situation, but the rest of them were like very infantile, which I thought was a choice.
I did think it was a bit vapid that like when the whole group of girls falls apart so fucking quick and they're all just shooting up each other. I was like, there's no way I would shoot my best friend so quickly. I'd probably like investigate the scenario a little bit before I go like pulling a gun on him.
That kind of to me seemed like a realistic reaction to the situation.
No.
Think about the amount of pressure you were under, knowing that you were being hunted, are expected to hunt your friends, otherwise you're all going to die. I think something like then your friend accidentally getting poisoned is going to set you off. Like, And they're children. Like, of course they're gonna
but
fucking lose it.
wasn't it sort of like very slapstick almost? Like,
But that's just the style of the film.
ridiculous,
I felt like it was almost
hyperbolic,
like
stupid.
oh, girls are so emotional they can't handle this situation in a way.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it just seemed like petty high school girl shit. Like, oh, I'm gonna immediately kill my best friend because I secretly hated her the whole time or something. Because I'm like, in this situation, I think you would want people close to you to stay there the longest so they can have your back.
I don't think it was necessarily like girl drama, but I do think that is like part of the teen genre, is this like the angsty pettiness turns to homicide. It was the same in the desktop horrors.
Yeah.
It's the same in a lot of them, that like what's scary about teenagers is how irrational they are and how like emotional and hormonal, and how those things, like, I don't know, I guess motivate. Like, I understand that it's hyperbolic and it's a movie and they raise the stakes, but I think it's interesting that like folks that age are at the center of like high stakes situations in this particular way, because I don't necessarily think that adults would be portrayed in a movie that way. I think adults would do the same thing. I think they would also turn on each other. But in movies, it's always like they have to be more rational, even though I don't think that's realistic. I think we don't give teens enough credit for... I think they would like at least try to team up or help each other more than they do.
For all the movies, like, one of the reoccurring themes is that they don't have like actual monsters. The humans are the monsters, because people see like the teens as unhinged and able to do anything evil, and then the adults are also useless and don't help the teens through anything at all, or either are an extension of the sadisticness shown by the teens. I think that's seen across like all the movies, because the adults in the situation are either like just as irresponsible and unhelpful, or like sadistic male teachers. And I think there were sadistic male teachers in almost every movie as well.
But do you think like the way they portray like young girls is definitely like they're unhinged is different than the boys unhinged? Like, one thing I thought was interesting was the emphasis on the fact that survival bags have tampons. I was like, okay. And then the tampon even becomes a plot point, like Mitsuko knew that somebody had committed, or maybe it was the other way around. She knew that someone had committed a murder because she'd seen her tampon in like the bathroom. And it just becomes like very, like our typical sort of monstrous feminine. Like, these women are so catty and they're all very hormonal and they're all so like in love and sexual and over the top with their emotions. I literally wrote in my notes, this should be named to Battle of the Simps, because I don't understand why everyone's dying words were like confessions of love. Yeah. Like Chigusa's dying words being, "You look really cool, thank you," to the guy. Oh, and she's like dying. I was like, you best believe I'd have some better things to say than that.
No, the boys were also that in love. The boys' final confessions were also exactly. Like, oh, she was so cute. Tell her I always thought she was so cute. Like, they're all pretty melodramatic.
But then with the women, it's also like, so before, like, they'll have scenes of like drawing attention to their sexuality, and they're like, you know, whereas the men didn't have like such sexual scenes. It would just be the simping, whereas girls were like sexual and simps.
Okay, for me, I really didn't see any issues with the way that like teenagers are presented, because within the movie, like, obviously the humor and the way it was blended with horror meant that they were obviously over-exaggerating certain characteristics of teens. And with young girls, I think they did a really funny, but also I didn't see it as a problematic take on teen girls. I thought it was pretty accurate, and it didn't seem to have any, it didn't seem like, I know you said, you know, brought up good old Monstrous Feminine. For me, there didn't seem to be any like sexualizing or Freudian undertone to it, at least not overtly. And then, like Zeba said, the boys are also going around simping. And you also had that guy being like, confessing his love to the girl who was running. And he's like, don't you want to have sex before we die? And he's like obsessed with her. And then he's like, I'm going to shoot you unless you do it. Like, boys are equally portrayed as like just for these like jacked up emotions and hormones.
This is like the age where girls would be into like pop stars and like K-pop and J-pop. Like the "you were so cool" thing is something that I remember when I was like in high school into K-pop, that people would like comment all the time on like K-pop idols, Instagram and social media. And so I think it's just like a funny little ode to like fangirl culture, because almost like this person that you were in a class with, you see them suddenly in like this cool fashion because now they're like chopping people up, which is not cool. Not cool, children, but like it's like watching an action hero in real life. So I think it was like a funny little fangirl take. So I think I'm with Mila on that. I don't think it was them simping. I think it was just teenagers being teenagers.
I don't know. I don't think it's realistic. Not mad at the hyperbole because I think it's funny. And I thought this film was really funny. And I think it's well done. And I think it makes me laugh to see the exaggerated over emotional woman trope in this film. But that doesn't mean it's not there, basically.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree. I think the comedy and the horror, the way they interact is really what makes this film so good. Because you're like you say, you laugh out loud, and then you're also like, this is horrific. What the fuck?
I love the propo-vid.
Yeah, that was my favorite part.
And like the comedic timing on that introduction was stellar.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
はい、こんにちは。
今日皆さんは幸運にも今年度バトルロワイヤルの大賞クラスに選ばれました。おめでとうございます。
The distrust of the government, and also the entire reason why they're there is because of the government. And interesting, because I would say like today's young people, particularly because of the internet and proximity to connecting to people all over the world, actually have more distrust for the government than I think people did in the 90s. And a lot of them are very critical to the point where people don't want to vote or altogether like want their political bodies to dissolve and have something brand new in place because they feel like the current systems are too corrupt. I think that was interesting because these kids honestly didn't seem like they cared that much about the government until they were put in the situation.
Yeah, that's so true.
They were put there because the government wanted to control the juveniles and thought that all the kids were out of control. But I was like, they honestly didn't seem to care until the government put this emphasis on them to control them. But now I think people are a lot more politically conscious and aware of the government and ruling bodies at a young age than they ever were before.
Well, I thought the reason that they were like going after like quote unquote juveniles or whatever, juvenile delinquents, is because like in the 90s or even a little bit earlier when the manga was out, that Japan was like having a bad economic time and there were a lot of unemployed young people who like, you know, there was like the crime rates were higher, and it was like a commentary on attitudes toward young people in Japan at the time, and like looking at them as like not contributing to society or not caring about like the economy or the greater good, or like they weren't as nationalistic because the country had failed them in X, Y, and Z ways. So I think it's dated in that way, and that like I don't necessarily think that young folks in Japan are viewed with such like animosity as they were like 30 years ago, but it's like deeply steeped in that like economic context too.
I think the director apparently had like a very hard time in his youth, and that was part of what made the movie come about.
Yeah, he said, I have a Guardian interview quote here. He said he was working in factories and like doing raids, like he'd be working with his friends, and this was I think when he was like 15 or something. And during raids, like, you would only think of self-preservation, and you'd have to, like, get behind each other or hide beneath dead bodies. And he said in another interview that he saw a body lit on fire. And because of, like, that's why he was interested in this film, and that's why he was kind of pissed that the government in Japan initially gave it, I think, a PG-15 rating or something like that. So only 16-year-olds could see it or something like that. And he was like, no, I saw such horrific things at 15. The whole point of this is that so the young people see it. Like, that's the target demographic. And I don't know. I think it was, like, a comment on the generational gap, yeah, as you were saying, because of, like, the effects of war and stuff. I put in the notes that why is there a Western classical music score?
I think in the books they said something about like throughout the novel they mentioned comparisons between Western politics and Eastern politics, more specifically Japan. I obviously have not read the book, so I cannot answer that question.
It's interesting to me because when I read the book summary on Wikipedia, the most reliable of all sources, it said that the couple escaped to America for the democracy, and I was like, turn around, you're not going to find it here.
But that's quite a usual, like, perspective of East Asian countries to have of America, given like America's overbearing influence. So maybe, I don't know whether in what way it's written in the books, but it could have been aware of that.
In the 90s in particular, there was a lot more military influence in Japan and Korea and all over the world because military bases were a lot more active. But yeah, the 90s was like that huge Americanism movement all over the world because of the military bases that were placed, and especially in Japan, I think there were quite a few there. So that also probably plays a role in it because like the military bases were seen as like a way to bring democracy to places and keep the spread of communism at bay and terrorism, all of that. So
do you think it's like successful indoctrination at play at the end there? Not that's a strong word, but like successfully spreading that image of America that they wanted?
I think especially within the youth.
I think it's, kind of like because that was there and things in the 90s were a certain way, it's very easy to, I guess, idolize what seems to be the most, I guess, powerful place in the world as being the best.
Our next film, Memento Mori, is the second film in the Whispering Corridors film series. The film is set in an all-girls high school and revolves around the relationship between two female students, Minhyo Shin and Yu Xian, and the backlash of their taboo romantic relationship. The film is told from a non-linear perspective and is sometimes shown from the POV of another female student, So Mina, who becomes obsessed with the relationship of Hyo Shin and Xian after finding a diary kept by the girls.
Can we first talk about how strange it is that this girl is like, who needs fan fiction? And I can read the diary of my classmates who are in a relationship.
I would too. Wouldn't you? I would.
I absolutely would read the diary. Oh no, I'm Ian Fryer. Fuck.
This man is getting so much plug.
I would read a diary that I found, and like on the side. I wouldn't if I knew already who it belonged to.
Oh, I would. I would especially.
Zeba, we know you would.
If somebody found my diary, I would want them to read it. Like,
you write.
Yeah, I write for an audience.
Let me tell you, it's overrated.
Oh, sex god Bob.
Sex
also,
god
like,
Bob.
When they're in the nurse's office and she's like reading the diary and it's like, I made this poison for you, but she eats the candy, and I was like, you ate candy out of a diary that you don't know how long it's been there?
I would have done it.
Choices.
Stop, Zeba.
You're telling me you wouldn't be curious? I feel like just for the adventure, for the drama of it all.
I think Mina, I think she had a crush on the other girl, Xian. I felt like she had a crush on her the entire time.
I agree.
And that she was like sort of jealous of the dynamic and like wished it was her. And I think I put in like my notes that it was funny that this is an all-girls school, but it still sort of played out like Xian being like the hot jock that two girls wanted, and one was a nerdy girl and one was a popular girl, and they were like vying for her affections. I thought that was so funny that they were still able to do that even in an all-girls school. And they were also concerned about like her track racing.
I forgot that they did track. You're so right. I was like, she wasn't a jock, but you're right. She was. I had a fat crush on both of them.
She also had like the more masculine haircut, and both of them were like more traditionally feminine by their haircut and the clothing that they wore, but she would wear like the sweatpants a lot and like a baggy t-shirt and kind of like trudge around, and people kind of like thought she was very cool.
We get it. You love her.
Kiss already.
And it's almost confirmed, like at the end when they walk by each other and they can read each other's thoughts, like they have that telepathic connection, which is code for gay.
I thought, I thought that too, and then I read that like these articles or whatever that were like, oh, she's possessed by Min Yoshin's spirit, and I was like, oh, I did not get that. I did not get that she was
at
possessed.
all.
I did not get this Tom Riddle-esque Harry Potter possession story. I thought she was just getting more gay because she was getting the representation she needed.
I think she was
in this
definitely
literature.
in love with her because even when they were in the room and they were doing the hearing test and she couldn't hear which ear it was, and she was telepathically telling her which ear it was so she could pass the exam and do her track race. And so at that point, Hyoshin wasn't even dead yet. So I don't think that was the case. I think maybe the men who watched this movie really desperately wanted not all the women to be gay in the movie, but I'm sorry, they were. They were in love.
I got a quote on that too. You best believe. There's a quote. But it actually was super interesting. It was in this article called Memento Mori and Other Ghostly Sexualities. Actually, I think it was a chapter in a book. The directors actually had quite an apolitical perspective on the film's queerness and kind of used it as like, it was basically like a side effect of what else they were trying to do. So I'll read the quote. As Bildungsroman signifies the process by which one enters society, the progression from homosexuality to heterosexuality becomes a vital series of codes for adolescence that reflects the inner struggle of the individual. And then they said the possession by a queer ghost represents the fear of otherness. For example, South Korean society fears North Korean communism, but this is really the fear of being called a communist, not the hatred of communism itself. That was what the director Kim Tae-young said, and the director Min Yo-dong said, if one defines it as lesbianism, one has a narrow view of love. We would like Memento Mori not to be seen as a propaganda. The most effective way of making a film is making it in the least political way. Essentially, all that means from what this article dissected is that it wasn't necessarily about, like, through the character of Mina, she's meant to sort of represent, like, it's meant to sort of be like, well, every teenage girl thinks about queerness before they become straight, essentially. Like, it's kind of like a key part of development is what they're trying to sort of say in that quote. And it's more about an inner struggle, which is meant to be symbolic of North and South Korea's political situation. And I was just like, no, like they weren't trying to basically be like jazz hands, yes, queer rep, essentially. It was just more of like, oh, accidentally did it.
I think this was like sort of indicative of how South Korea was back then versus how it is now. Because like this movie was like, from what I've read, was kind of taboo at the time, and people were like, I don't want to watch that. The Whispering Corridor series is supposed to be horror. I don't really want to watch this. This is a lesbian movie. But a few years ago, in 2016, they had The Handmaiden come out, and that was a heavily lesbian movie where the two main characters had sex scenes that were quite graphic. And that movie was very critically acclaimed, and it grossed, I think they sold like 4 million tickets or something like that in Korea, and it was the movie that they, I believe, sent to the Oscars as the official film for Korea for their entry. Wow. So over time, it's sort of changed, but I wouldn't say South Korea is a not homophobic country at all, because it still is, and they still have a long while to go, as the rest of the world does. But at this time, I think this was more of the directors trying to like market the movie as horror and make it into something that it maybe was not quite, just because they did not want the taboo or the backlash of it being a full-on queer film, which honestly is kind of shitty.
But like throwback to Nightmare on Elm Street 2, when the director was also trying to be like, this isn't clearly gay, even though it was super gay. For the first couple minutes of this, maybe even the first half hour, I was like, okay, this is clearly gay, but they're about to tell me it's not. And then it was explicitly gay. I was like, this is the gayest thing I've ever seen. Like, you can say it's homosocial for sure. Perhaps like the dudes in Battle Royale, their initial, just hanging out best friends could be just really close friends. But I think they really explicitly made this lesbian, and like not just of their own confirmation, but of every other character observing their relationship thinks it's romantic and sexual. So it, to me, almost is more blatant than Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and like a little bold of the directors to claim that it's not, because I don't think anyone is buying that, even somebody who really doesn't want to see it.
I mean, they explicitly say they were in a relationship, because she's like, I think we should get back together.
Yeah.
And they're celebrating other anniversaries and birthdays. I don't really think
they
you can back out and
kiss.
say
It was a lot, yeah.
I was gonna say, what did you guys think of? Because I think one of the queerest moments, besides the actual queer montage of their relationship, which was so cute at the beginning, before it got a little toxic and they started talking about like mutual suicide. But I say a little toxic, but that's really just lesbians. Like, I will die. If you die, I die. What did you think about in terms of like a horror being queer, that possession scene, that like when she can't close the book and the ghost is like up her skirt, and that also made me, what I was saying in the beginning is like the fact that she's meant to be possessed by her in the end because she's read the diary, and I was like, but the possession scene, like the most explicit possession scene, was very external. Like it wasn't anyone like occupying her from within and making her act outwards. It was the ghost coming at her. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like a typical possession scene, and it was very weird and sexual. And I read another article called 3 Periods of Korean Queer Cinema, Invisible Camouflage and Blockbuster, essentially sort of saying what you were saying, Tyia. Like, I think you sort of touched on it, how horror is like a buffer. Like, it allows people to talk about queerness under the safety cover if it was more controversial to depict on film. This can't not be just gay, and you can easily cop out by being like, it's possession, but like, it's really just queer.
That like possession scene, I mean not possession scene, it's more like a sort of, I guess, a haunting. It definitely, it definitely like throws back to the whole like Nightmare on Elm Street 2 possession narrative as like gay feelings invading a host type vibe. But I also kind of saw it, if we were talking about maybe Mina being gay also, as her, which then again is still framed in a slightly problematic way because she's terrified of obviously someone, this entity like touching her, but it might be like a sort of subconscious desire.
You think it was like a fantasy? Or like fantasy hidden behind horror? That's why I was like, I said low-key rape scene, because I was like, I mean, technically yes, but also...
But is it not technically yes? Because so for A Nightmare on Elm Street, it was all about being penetrated by a spirit, whereas in this case, it's just like vibes, you know, like vibes take over the body, which, and I think that also has something to do with, but like what I was gonna say is that like, do we view women on women relationships as like inherently like less physical, more emotional, and that makes it like not as bad of a possession story because like the body isn't being taken violently, but like her mind starts to sort of be overtaken even before she's dead. You know what I mean? Like I would argue the possession starts when the toxic nature of the relationship starts. I think that like it's, while it may not be as explicitly physically violent as like the, you know, gay is violent themes in other horror movies, I mean, I think this is kind of hot tea on lesbian relationships, if I'm being real, about like how the closeness can be toxic, and it was a little bit relatable. It was a little bit like, yeah.
I'm saying it, right? I was like, is this? I literally wrote in my notes, is this toxic or just lesbian?
Yeah.
I feel like maybe their relationship, I mean, I don't really know, but I mean, it felt toxic to me because they were like everything for each other, and I think that is what can make a relationship unhealthy, because you can't have one person be like your only friend, like a sibling / parent type guardian relationship, and then also your romantic partner, because that's just too much pressure and also just insanely unhealthy to hold one person to that type of standard. And I don't actually think Shion felt as strongly for Hyoshin as Hyoshin felt towards her.
Yeah.
I think it was almost like she was kind of like driving the gears behind that relationship, and Shion was just kind of there. Like I think she was into her and they mutually liked each other, and I think Hyoshin was like in this deep pit of love, and Shion was just like, I mean, okay. Because I don't think she didn't have like the same outcast factor that Hyoshin did, but Hyoshin didn't really have any friends, and people made fun of her, and that girl was like, even when she died and the girl was like, well, I should have bashed her head in last year because I hated her. And no one really had a substantial reason to hate her other than she was really good at poetry and she was a great composer and all the teachers liked her. So I think because she had like no one else, it was just too much of a pressure in the relationship to where she was making this girl do everything for her. And it was almost like the healthy unhealthiness that we talked about in Midsummer, where it was like, you cannot do that to your partner and think it's okay. Like, you can't just offload everything onto one person and think it's fine. When she tells her, like, oh yeah, like, I met up with Mr. Go and, like, I had to sleep with him because he was really sad, which that was a completely different, separate thing that we have to address. But, like, she was, like, also a kid who knows this teacher who probably didn't necessarily want to know this. It was definitely a conversation that she should have been having with an adult in her life rather than another student that she was in a relationship with who she was also telling her that she would take her life if she left her. Like, I don't know. It was a lot.
It's like the most toxic of like the lesbian relationship stereotype, and then you take it times 10 and you put it all in one character, and that's her.
Do you guys think this is really a horror?
Yes, I think it's more than a horror than Battle Royale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not on like a scale of whether you're scared or disturbed. Discussing genre and breaking it down is like my least favorite thing to talk about with film because it gets me really confused.
What is genre?
Yeah, what is genre? So I'm just going to say yes and offer no reasons for it.
Okay,
I'm going to say
like
yes, but only the second half.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's like typical.
But that's still,
a lot
yeah.
of horror.
No.
They gotta
like a lot
blow
of
it up.
The Other Lamb, please. I think anything can be a horror if you want it to be a horror. That's my hot take.
Okay, that's just like a cop-out. At least
It's
I
not a
pretended
cop-out.
I knew.
I think I had some horror in it, but like, I don't know. At some points, it felt very art house to me. Like, I think I would say like an art house horror film. Part of it, I feel like, I know it was like supposed to be a haunting thing, but I felt like it was more of like this very sad, horrifying story of what happened to this girl named Hyoshin. Like, at the scene where after she dies, there's like the red bird in the room that's like trapped. I just felt like that was very symbolic of like how her spirit was trapped in the school and she couldn't get out because, I mean, she had like that horrifying relationship with the teacher, Mr. Go, who was taking all of his emotions out on like a teenage girl and manipulating her into having sex with him. And then she had this pregnancy from him that she didn't want to have, and then she had this toxic relationship where she was obsessed with this girl, and it kind of is like just showing how she's driven to psychopathy just because of all of these factors in her life that make her take her own life and then eventually take revenge on others by haunting them.
I think the most art house part of this film was definitely the sort of mixed up chronology of the film, which the first time I watched it completely threw me. I was like, what the fuck is happening? It makes me appreciate it so much more from like a enjoyment point of view, because I think it kind of like forces you to pay attention, which sounds like homework, but in a good way. I mean that in a positive way. But I think if we're also talking about queer film, and now that we've also talked about how the directors were like, it's not about gays, it's just about communism, take it with a grain of salt. But non-linear perspectives in queer films is often used as a way to like queer film form and narrative. And it's like another way to challenge the viewer to reconsider constructed or traditional ways of framing the world, and then also our relationships. So it's like a really fun way to translate that into sexuality. But now I'm like, do you even care about the gays at all?
But you might just look at them as like maybe they did secretly care and they're just saying that in an interview to save
Actually,
their ass.
fair enough.
So,
That's and I
we don't
respect
know.
that too.
What
What?
did you guys think of fucking hell? Would you just too hype? Calm down. What did you guys think of the institutional like oppression that was so blatant? You know, with the whole like I was floored when the teacher called the student Flatty. He's like, hey, Flatty. I was like, first of all, triggered. Second of all, how is that allowed?
I don't know if they still do that in Korea. They weigh them for physical.
Yeah, that whole scene, I was like, I have never had a gym class that was just like, let's just make everyone feel like shit about themselves. I mean, like, gym class always feels like shit, but they're like, let's take it to a 10. That's really put everyone's business in the street.
I thought it was like I think it was on the cult episode, Zeba, where you said like women will police each other in a way that men never will. And like the way that they were like making fun of her, being like, did you even shave your forehead so you would be lighter, and just the general policing of each other's bodies really really reminded me of that. I was like, wow, like even these high school girls are like, the way that they're policing each other's bodies, like their chest, even the girl like wanting to be taller because she was like 146 centimeters. I was like, girl, I'm like 155 centimeters. But even like them just making fun of her, like trying to jump up and be taller and everything, I was like, the way that they're policing each other's bodies and something that guys at a male school would never do. The only thing that I think men would ever police on each other's bodies is like dick size. That's the only thing that they make fun of each other for, really. Because, I mean, they have, like, the short cane kingdom on Twitter where they talk about being short. So I don't think they care in the same way that women do. But, like, when they were calling out their weights, I noticed that they all weighted somewhere between, like, 90 to 110 pounds. And they were calling people fatty. No. I think, to be honest, they're probably all underweight.
Yeah.
It was very, very strange.
I know that, like, obviously the diet culture is hugely different in Korea, but it was interesting, like, compared to my experience at an all-girls school, there wasn't so much pressure to be slim from each other. However, everyone was very much aware of the just, like, broader societal pressure to be slim. However, if somebody noticed someone was dieting or exercising excessively, then that's what people would be talking about. They'd be like, I'm really worried about this person. There wasn't so much like, oh, that, you know, she's got like fat arms, bullshit like that.
I wanted to talk about the like bullying horror crossover because it happens in so many, like every Stephen King book about anybody under the age of 18, like the core of it is bullying a lot of the time, even if the bullies are not the thing to be afraid of, like the monster or the supernatural bit or even like the murderer. The bullies are always like the low hum that follows a lot of horror movie plots about young people, and that was true in all of these, but it's so many of them, like any 80s slasher, it goes along with that like bad home life thing, but the bullying is always like it's just assault sometimes, like it's not even like teasing, it's things that I would consider like illegal behavior and also pretty extreme, which makes sense for the genre. But like I think it's super interesting that like low-lying hum of anxiety of bullying that like follows the protagonist of a lot of these is like sometimes the scarier aspect, and it's put in the foreground in this like very scary way. And with boys, so I'm thinking about It chapter 1, when they're all children, when the boys are being bullied, it's like physical, they fucking like throw rocks at each other. A little bit in Memento Mori, they had that sort of girl fight, but they kind of remind me of lesbian porn because they were like, But driving somebody to suicide is something that happens, it's giving Carrie in that like you drive someone either to suicide or the point of revenge.
I was gonna say Carrie vibes, and it much like with Carrie, I was like, kill him. I don't know. I just do it then. When
you bring up like how it's quite like an 80s slasher trope, like that excessive bullying in high school. Now that I think about it, it seems very American to me.
But this movie's not American.
Bullying?
Explain it.
Bullying in the way that Zeba described. Not so much in Memento Mori, but in like Stephen King novels, like the sort of small town bullying. I don't know how to explain it.
No, it is. It's like some guy who chews too much bubble gum or something, and then he spits, and he's like, I'm gonna give you a wedgie. Yeah. Like, it's just, there's something distinctly American about that.
I've never witnessed that behavior in real life.
No. But that's what I thought, like, do you think this hyperbolic or sometime depiction of bullying, kind of the same point we had in the cyberbullying discussion in desktop horror, when, like, the bullying gets so severe, it almost does not seem as real as, like, of course there are extreme examples of bullying like that, but when you present that as, like, the norm that happens in all schools, doesn't that just create the idea that if it's not to that level, then the more casual forms that you'd see every day in real life are not as serious? Can we talk about the teacher? Why was the teacher there? Why did we even have to have it? Was it some sort of reassuring? Did we need him for some sort of like injection of heterosexuality into her life?
Yes.
but then it's not even okay because it's pedophilic.
At first, I thought the teacher was cute, and then they ruined him by making him a pedophile. I was like, wow, they got this nice teacher who's also jacked and cute, okay. And then I was like, oh, never mind, he's a pedophile. Well, that went out the
But he was
window.
also just
Aw.
he was just like a very bland character with
What was his name?
nothing going
Mr.
for
Go.
him.
I thought
Mr.
something
Go.
was weird at first when like they saw each other in like the teacher's office place, and she's like telling him she's sick or something, and he like pats her on the arm, and he's like, it's okay, just go to the nurse. And I was like, this is kind of weird. I don't like my teachers to touch me.
I didn't get that he was a teacher then. I thought he was just another kid and it was like a peer.
What?
And
I
a
was
suit
looking for
at an
a
all-girls
teenager.
school.
I didn't pay attention to the men. Listen, I was watching purely because you said it was a gay ghost story. So I was like, any guy that appeared, I was like,
Irrelevant.
this is not for you. This is not your time. Which is why I was even more annoyed when he ended up sleeping with her. I was like, it's not about you right now.
That seems like a very confusing subplot, her getting pregnant. And because it wasn't like he did nothing. I
Yeah.
swear he did nothing. I don't understand.
He was just like crying in her lap.
Yeah.
At first, when there was that scene where he was crying in her lap, I thought it was her and Shion actually having oral sex.
Same. Oh my god.
And I was like, oh, it's this man crying in her lap.
I come across as so horny on this.
Like,
And-
why was he crying all the time?
I don't know. I was like, why is he so depressed? Also, I feel like for him to be a depressed older man, wouldn't he have? Would you also want to add a baby to that? Would you not give this girl some condoms? Why are you free flying up in here?
Raw dogging it.
And a student? Like, come on, sir. This is beyond irresponsible.
I think we're thinking about it too hard. I think he definitely was just there to like inject that like maybe she's not all the way gay. I genuinely think that was like the end of
Yeah,
it
maybe.
because
That's That's what I got. I was like, I think he's just a reassuring heterosexuality, but then he's a pedophile, so nothing about that's reassuring in
Also,
any way.
slight negative is I feel like because they put him there to inject like maybe she's not gay, they almost made it seem like they weren't necessarily acknowledging how problematic their relationship was in a way, because she was like, oh, I had to do it because he was sad, and like she felt like she was lying and like she wanted to, and it was like, I mean, even if she agreed to this and fully had a crush on him, she is a child and this is a grown-ass man. No.
Yeah.
There's nothing about this where anything she could ever be held responsible for this. She's like a whole kid. This isn't like she's 18 and he's 30. This is like she's a minor and this is an adult man who is in a position of power. No.
Louisa, I don't blame you for not realizing he was a teacher because they brush over it so quickly that you're like, oh, maybe he's just a teenager that she met.
I thought like TA, like I thought like I don't know, volunteer.
Girl, what
I
TAs
really didn't.
what TAs are in high school?
I don't know.
They just didn't make it seem like it was a bad relationship. They really did make it seem like she has feelings for him too, and that's
Like
why
it's
he's
normal
crying in
to
her
just
lap.
date
And I was
your
like,
teacher.
this is an adult man who should not be anywhere near this girl or any children for that matter, since he feels like it's okay to put his dick inside of them.
I read the article which was talking about how I can't remember which one. It was talking about how like the fact that she gets pregnant was to like create another sort of pressure, like a pressure of heterosexuality, which would be just yet another reason of why she has to kill herself. But then I think that all becomes moot again if you consider the fact that it was meant to be not necessarily a political stance on queerness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I also think they were foreshadowing that she was going to jump off the building the entire movie, because I remember at the beginning when her and Sheehan were like play fighting on the roof, and I was like, this is such a dangerous hobby to have. Why are y'all play fighting on the roof? And then there's like the other scene where they like go back to the roof to like make up, and she almost falls, and then Sheehan like pulls her by the arm up.
In like the K-dramas and the movies I've seen, if they do talk about suicide in a high school setting, they always jump off the roof.
Yeah.
How did they get up there?
There's an access point, like there is a place to go on the roof.
Side note, you don't necessarily die if you jump off a roof if it's not high
Not very
enough.
high up.
Otherwise, you will just be like very severely injured in the hospital and probably have a TBI, but I don't think you die from like
What's a TBI?
traumatic brain injury.
Okay, Grey's Anatomy. Can we talk about the mental health aspect of this too? Because okay, maybe we should wait until, or this can transition into the craft. But the cutting, the self-harm, I didn't realize how prevalent it was in I don't know if they still, I don't watch teen shows that are new, that are on anymore. I don't know how prevalent they are, but the ones that we grew up with, I'm like, oh, y'all taught people how to fuck their lives up. All of those big dramatic life of the American teenager types of plot arcs. Because I feel like that wouldn't be on TV now, because somebody would say something about hey, content warning. I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
they did put out
13
13 reasons why. Yeah, they put that out there.
It's so, isn't it so Tumblr?
Yeah.
It is bit Tumblr.
Actually, all of the craft felt like it was made for Tumblr. While I understand it existed long before, it's if Tumblr was a movie.
That's so true.
Earth, air, fire, water, air.
Our last film, The Craft, centers around an outcast group of girls who are rumored to be witches as they strike up a friendship with a new student, Sarah, who has unusual abilities. Bonnie convinces the group to allow Sarah to be the fourth member of their coven. Gradually, the girls start to face the consequences of their spells and the drawbacks of the power, all the while navigating school and the rocky dynamics of teenage friendships.
It is better that you should rush upon this blade than enter this circle with fear in your heart. How do you enter? With perfect love and perfect trust. That's a girl. As above, so below.
I feel like they took too many different genres of high school girls and put them in the same friend group of people who would never talk to each other.
But maybe they were all the outcasts.
They were all pretty mean girls, but not pretty mean in the Mean Girls way, but they were pretty mean as in genuinely off-putting. Not popular. That's a type of teenage girl for sure. Emo in middle school and then grew up to be just not super personable.
Stop, that's me.
No, Tyia, that's so not you.
Tyia, I was gonna say that's so not
That's
you.
the furthest thing from
No,
you.
thanks guys, I'm glad I'm personable. I was emo in middle school though. I was so unapproachable. I used to wear black every day and it was so embarrassing. I didn't know how to put on eyeliner and I would put on too much. It was bad. It was bad.
I don't think I had much of an emo phase. I think I just listened to emo music and I felt it internally, but externally I was always looking probably quite preppy, but because preppy implies I had a fashion sense, which I didn't. It was very 2000s, 2000s swallowed me up and spit me out. I had a cardigan all the time because I always wore spaghetti straps because I was dangerous,
Slutty.
like to live life on the edge and break the dress code. So I always had to have a cardigan just because everything I had was skimpy.
Why didn't you like Sarah, Louisa? I really want to hear you.
Oh my god, let me tell you. Because first of all, she's just no fucking fun. She gets powers and the first thing she thinks of is, I'm gonna make this guy love me. And the thing is, to be fair, I could believe that someone would do that, I guess, some vapid girl. However, it's the type of guy she also chooses. It's not just the fact that she could have any power in the world and she chooses a love spell on a guy. It's what the hell? It's on top of the fact that she chooses a love spell for that guy. I mean, he just insulted the group of girls, the witches, for no reason. He just thought they were weird because one was a burn victim and the other was from a bad home life, and the other one was just Rochelle, I guess, was just weird. He didn't actually say. He didn't actually say. He didn't even consider her. So I was just what is? I don't understand why she even and then what he did, the gaslighting, the abuse that he has. Demonstrates towards her at the beginning was so severe, and she forgives it so easily, and then when she's saying what spell she wants, she's I know I'm pathetic, and I was you're not just pathetic.
But didn't she also say in the same breath, I want to love myself more? And I was but you don't, because you just did this.
Yeah.
Wasn't it a way to get back at him? That's kind of how I thought it was supposed to play out.
That's the other thing that it's I hate that. Don't masquerade as feminist when it's not feminist. It's not I'm gonna get back at him, I'm gonna own the power because he's gonna be very deeply in love with me. It's no, you're choosing you. She said I'm pathetic, so that implies she wanted him to care because she still cared, right?
You're right.
And then also that whole depiction of the love spell veering off of Sarah, like the whole rape scene, I thought was such a problematic depiction. Like his motivations are like he's under a love spell and that makes him want to rape her. I was like, think about the message you're sending to young teenage girls. If a guy rapes you, it's because he's overwhelmed with desires because he loves you. I was like, this is terrible. That's like the one thing that I was like, terrible representation in the film, and I was like, I wish this wasn't in it. And then the fact that she finds him a redemptive figure at the end as well, and she's like, don't kill him, and Nancy's meant to be unhinged because she does, although Nancy's low-key trying to like assault him back, which is also really weird. Like avenge rape.
I agree with you, and I didn't actually consider that with that almost rape scene.
It was bad.
But was it, you mentioned like that it suggested excessive love then translates into rape. Was it not that her love spell, you know how that witch, the bookstore witch, was saying that things were going to come back threefold? I understood it as more like a perverted love because... No, but then Sarah was meant to be the good witch. So you're right.
She was a dick.
You're right.
She had terrible clapbacks. She just said, she just wrote, hey, Chris, fuck you.
Yeah.
I was like, please.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Can we also talk about how bad all the spells were in general and like how they were all very vapid? Like Bonnie's was for beauty, which makes sense because... I mean, she had, like, the burn victim stuff and people made fun of her. But then Sarah's was for love. Rochelle's was for revenge, which, honestly, I felt like was teetering on making her an angry black woman. And then Nancy's was for power, which I was like, how much power are you going to have in this town? I don't know, girl, but I guess you do you. I felt like it was just very predictable. Like, they really led us exactly to what each person wanted. Like, she was very insecure because she had the burn scars, and Rochelle was racially tormented at that school, and none of her white friends stood up for her. That's a different story for a different day. And Nancy wanted power because she felt like she wasn't in control, and people just thought she was a freak. And I almost feel like the way that they explained the spells made them all subtly anti-heroes, but also they were just very stereotypical. I don't know. I feel like they could have made them have some different spells, mix it up a little bit, something that wasn't...
Do people actually like this movie?
I think a lot of people love this movie. I think that it's a cult movie. I think people like it for the aesthetic more than the content. I feel the same with Heathers.
I actually really like Heathers.
I did not like the Heathers.
I love Heathers.
No, I only like Winona, and that's it.
What? Oh my god, it's all amazing.
I mean, that is the only movie that I've ever felt attracted to Christian Slater while watching.
This movie, Heathers, and like a lot of movies of this era, not even like scary or like alternative, even like Virgin Suicides, like this, like the other, anything with Winona in it, quite frankly, is like really builds this archetype of like the alternative girl, but they really are all the same. Like they are carbon copies of each other, but in different movies. But I think people love that because they saw themselves in that, like, well, I'm not like what has been displayed up until the early 2000s, late 90s.
But they're also very vanilla.
They're also very vanilla, yeah. And it's super white. Even the characters of color are super white in how they like act, and like they also don't have, I guess besides Nancy, a complex enough backstory to justify why they're like that.
I wrote in my notes that why is Sarah the same character as Bella Swan? I am upset. That's literally my notes. But, I mean, low-key, still they do that same thing where they are like this Bella Swan.
And normal people.
Yeah. And what's that movie called? 50 Shades. She's also still like that same type of like sort of innocent and nice, but also alternative.
But can we talk about Rochelle more in depth? Because you mentioned like how none of them had an in-depth home life except for Nancy. I didn't actually notice until I read this interview, but Rachel True did an interview with Cosmopolitan, and she said, when I was first cast in that movie, I did think Bonnie is burned, Nancy is crazy, Sarah's suicidal, and I'm black. Young me thought, the producers and Americans think blackness in itself is the problem. Now my perspective has shifted. Thank God they had a racism storyline there. That was a very valid storyline. But I wish she had parents, and I wished it had been explored more.
Yeah.
And I was like, it is true that I didn't realize because I wasn't paying that much attention to the other home life of the characters, but she was the only one whose parents weren't introduced at any point. and it's just kind of like she's just there, and I can see her point of like her plight is just being black.
Yeah, because she's very pretty in the movie. Like, she's super pretty. She still is. Rachel Drew's like so stunning. She has nice clothes. She's middle class. There's nothing that compares her to the other characters. They just are like, oh, everyone hates her because she's black. I was like, this is a way that they took the storyline, and I didn't feel like her friends ever like adequately really stuck up for her.
Yeah.
They just seemingly didn't care. And even when she's like at the little Coven circle where they're like trying to get their powers, and she's like, and I shouldn't pay attention to the racist assholes, especially ones with blonde hair and blue eyes. And they have her say it in like such a Brady Bunch fashion. And I'm like, this is the way that the stuff that girl was saying to her was more than just like it was not casual racism. It was like intensely neo-Nazi racism.
Yeah, sadistic.
It was very
I didn't
messed up.
understand the also, because as much, we also had the rapist apologist in Sarah. We had the racism apologist in Rochelle, because she started feeling bad when her hair was falling out and she was like having a breakdown about it. And I was just like, were any people of color, black people, consulted with this? Because I don't think you'd feel any remorse. Like, you wouldn't look at her and be like, oh. I'd be like,
she
you
wasn't
dying. Because like you said, it wasn't
was
even
her
like
hair.
casual or like she made an ignorant comment.
Yeah.
It was like direct, explicit, not excusable, irredeemable racial abuse. So I was like, who would look at her
Also,
and feel sorry?
of the punishments, her hair falling out was like the least.
I know, yeah.
Also, the fact that they
Yeah,
gave her
true.
blonde hair and blue eyes. I see what you did there. It was a choice that should not have been made.
And then on that, though, I just thought, like, because I couldn't really understand Rochelle's character in general, because they made her seem sympathetic, but then in the end, she's not, she goes with Bonnie and Nancy and tries to kill her. So I thought originally she would be, like, on Sarah's side, and then it turns out that she's also against her. And I was just like, well, hang on a minute. I thought you were trying to go the route of, like, she's more moral because she can sympathize with her, the person who is racist against her, towards her. But then it's like all of a sudden she goes back into being like toxic bitch. And I was like, so what even was the point of her showing remorse for that blonde crying woman, if not to just make us feel like we shouldn't?
Yeah, and I wouldn't want her to be the moral high ground either. Like, I think that would have been shitty too.
It almost felt like, oh, like, even though she was racist, her hair shouldn't come out. And I was like, everything can come out for all I care. They made Rochelle such a sidekick that they didn't even remember that she also apparently had a moral code that they also gave her so she wouldn't be mean to white people.
Yes. I literally, I said, what do you make of her sidekick character? Because I was like, it seems true of Bonnie. Like, fine, there wasn't too much depth to Bonnie. Mm-hmm. But, like, Rochelle had more depth, and then she just... Rachel True, again, in the same interview, was like, it was hard to shoot the end, like, when Rochelle's lost her powers, because she thought that Rochelle is more powerful than this. Rochelle wouldn't go crawling back. And then she said, I imagine if she had been around a bunch of black witches, imagine how powerful Rochelle would have been.
Amazing.
And I was like, it's so true. I did not understand why she, like, came back with her tail between her legs. I was like, nothing about her character is consistent or black. I know, I mean, in terms of how it was written. This
is like one of those movies that I feel like they wrote with an all-white cast and then said, you know what, let's put one black person in for diversity, and did not factor in anything on how, like, the race would change the character.
It's like that thing of, like, color, like, people were really promoting colorblind casting, and I was like, no. You're doing it wrong.
It is doable. Like, Shonda Rhimes does colorblind casting and then, like, changes the script afterwards, but she just writes the characters out and out, but also, like, she's not a white person, so it makes a difference.
I read somewhere that the character of Rochelle originally was supposed to be bulimic, a white girl who was bulimic, and then I read, it was meant to be a white girl who was bulimic, and then they changed it and made it a racist narrative for her because she was black.
What's annoying is, like, they still could have did that storyline with her being bulimic with a black character. Like, the only thing black people have, it's not like a monolith. The only experience that a black character can have is racism, because there's 1,000 different things that black people go through, and it could be bulimia, or it could be being a burn victim, or being a victim of bullying, or having a shitty home life where you need money, and, like, Nancy, like, any of these things could have happened with her, but instead they went with, because she's black, people hate her. Like, it was just such a lazy choice.
You can just see this writer's room being like, guys, I've got it. Forget bulimia. One of my favorite lines in this movie is when Nancy like storms off, and I think it is Rochelle that's like, oh, I don't know, maybe she's annoyed about she can't stop being white trash, and then she's like, I told her, you're white, honey, just deal with it.
A lot of people need to hear that, though.
Did you guys feel like Nancy was actually evil when you watched this movie, or did you feel like she was more like an anti-hero who had like a lot of things going on in her life? And her
straight
her
up bitch.
I thought she was nuts. I thought she was 100% nuts because like her circumstances did not warrant the behavior. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't see her as an anti-hero either. Like, because I read one article or review which was trying to hate on Sarah, was trying to redeem Nancy, and I was like, no, because I wouldn't make Nancy very redeemable either, because I don't think that disguised revenge rape scene, and then also making her kind of vapid, and she secretly wanted Chris the whole time. I was like, why?
Yeah.
I wrote that she was like also has like some lesbian one-liners. Like, not even me reading into it. I know I'm making everyone gay in literally every single film we talk about, but this was
maybe
true.
Everyone
She said, I love a woman in uniform at like some throwaway line at the beginning, and then afterwards when they're doing the light as a feather, stiff as a board, she's like, you have to put your fingers underneath her, and she's like, put your fingers where?
Now you take your index finger and your middle finger, and you put it under her like this. I think I sprained my finger. Shut up! Focus! Come on, you guys. Come on, ready? Light as a feather, stiff as a board. 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 Light as a feather, stiff as a board.
I totally missed that.
How could you? The light as a feather, stiff as a board scene was the gayest thing ever. The way they all stuck their fingers. I was like...
So Rachel True rightly called out this convention on Twitter, which had actually just booked her 3 co-stars and did not even, like, just didn't ask her to join this panel. I don't remember what it was.
So rude.
And she said, sounds about white. And then she said, like, kind of like the press junkets back in the day for the film. And then she said, it was like a series of tweets. I, like, picked out the most, like, poignant ones. And she said, this thread makes me remember the shitty feeling of watching the other 3 girls present that year at the MTV Movie Awards while I sat in the audience despite having 2 movies coming out. These things aren't the worst to suffer, but accumulated over the years are exhausting. And then she said, which I thought was so sad, she said, I brought up award shows, etc., because being left out of these events doesn't just hurt ego, it had a direct effect on POC actors' pocketbooks and public profiles and level of celebrity. And she said again, this isn't about self-absorption, it's about racism, priority, and speaking up is costing me money, but may help younger folk coming up down the line achieve those things. And then apparently the convention, like, she shared a screenshot where the convention tried to act like they're not going to ask her now because she called them out and was rude on Twitter, but actually she knew from her colleague that they were booked months ago anyway, so they were just trying to save their own ass. And then it's not just that, she's also been left off of the credits and listings on streaming services like Showtime, Netflix, and Amazon Prime Video, and she called these out too and eventually got them all corrected, but they, like, didn't put her as, like, a star.
I just Googled the cast, like, just regular Google, and she doesn't show up.
I cannot believe why.
It's so blatant.
I mean, we know why.
I don't think I know why. Up until the point that she, like, was shit talking the movie and the experience, I can't tell you why. Like, why cast her if you don't want her at the press junkets? It doesn't make sense. And
I think she said something like, it made me sad that she was saying, like, it's not about ego. It's because I was like, even if it was just about ego, I would I'd allow you. Like, I'd be like, hey, I starred in your movie and you're not gonna fucking credit me or invite me to the press? Fuck you. Mm-hmm. And apparently, like, they mostly at the time were, like, pushing Neve Campbell because she was probably the highest celebrity. But as True points out, like, if you continuously exclude black actresses or black actors, then they're never going to achieve the level of celebrity because you're not letting them have public exposure.
Yeah.
And it's just...
Neve Campbell was barely in that movie, to be fair, so...
Yeah.
If anyone shouldn't have been listed, it should have been her. But they have her name first on, like, everything, and so you would think she plays a much larger role, but she's barely in it.
Also, Rachel True's the only one, as far as I know, this who's like very into like tarot. She's into like the sort of culture of witchcraft in general. She has a tarot card line. It's not a clothing line, but she has tarot cards coming out.
That's so cool. I want them.
I think they're out actually. I think they launched this year in October or something. So she's like the most relevant one to promote. I don't know how into it she was back then. I want her to come on to the podcast and give us a tarot reading. We love you.
Thank you for listening to The Monstrous Feminine. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, SoundCloud, and Spotify at The Monstrous Feminine Podcast, and on Twitter at The MonFemPod. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts to be our next Witch of the Week. Brooms up, witches out.